Hi viewers, welcome back to our learning channel. In this today's session, we are going to start detailed tutorial about project designing. This is also part of the monitoring, evaluation, learning and research series. In this tutorial, our focus is on the initial stage, conceiving a project, learning basic concepts. So there are four different stages. In the first stage, we will understand what are the logic models, what are the M&E framework and the M&E plan, what are the proposal work plan and the budget, and then our next stage will be how to develop these logic model like theory of change, result framework, logical framework, or M&E framework and M&E plan, proposal, work plan and budgets, etc. How to develop them and then how to put them into practice. But before going forward, let me remind you, don't forget to subscribe, like and share. So while conceiving a project, there are four key steps to be followed. Number one is the logic models. You have to develop the logic model. What is the theory of change for you based on the whenever a project is announced? So there are some key objectives or strategic objectives of the donors. So against those objectives, you have to develop your logic models. Then at the next stage, you have to develop project documents, proposal, work plan and budget. And then you have to develop the M&E framework and the M&E plan and matrix. And then we start the implementation. So in this tutorial, our focus will be on these stages and how to develop these documents and how to put them into practice. Now let's discuss each stage in details, the basic concepts. Number one, developing logic models. So what are the key important elements for this step one? Here we need situation analysis. You have to do brainstorming, consultations, and sessions while developing these logic models. These are the key elements that you have to undertake. For situation analysis, we have done a detailed tutorial on how to conduct needs assessment. So the link is given in the description. You can watch that video also. But the situation analysis is very important. So first will be the ToC, then the result framework, and then the logical framework or the log frame, which is basically input activities output. Now let's discuss first what these logic models are. So the first one is ToC, theory of change. Now the key important elements for this ToC is the situation analysis. For example, a project has been announced on education. So you have to do the situation analysis around that key strategic objective of the donor. What is the current situation? For example, if a project is on improving teacher performance, so you have to do situation analysis against teacher performance. If it is a health project and the basic purpose is to increase access and quality of health services, so you will have to do situation analysis against the current status of the quality and the access of the health services. If it is on wash, so you have to do situation analysis around the wash according to the key strategic object. For example, the first question in the ToC is what is the problem? So you have to uh, give the problem statement that this is the problem. Now the next one is what are the barriers or the drivers needs to be focused to address this problem. For example, if there is a problem, lack of health facilities or lack of teacher proper training or wash facilities or any other project, so you have to identify the barriers. What are those barriers and what are the drivers that needs to be focused to address this problem? Then you have to suggest what to do. What is suggested to do, keeping in mind the problem and barriers and the drivers? What you have to do, what are the interventions that you have to bring in? For example, what input activities intervention are needed, then what will be the output and outcome of those intervention, and then ultimately the result or goal or impact. So this is basically a ToC, and you have to present it in the reverse order. So you will start from the problem, then from the barriers, and from bottom you will go upward to the goal and the impact. You can develop ToC for a function, department, etc. also. For example, if you have a department which is not properly working, So you can develop theory of change for that department also, that what is the problem, what are the barriers, what you have to do, what will be the outcome, and what will be the goal and the result or impact ultimately. So it's not only for a project, it's for anything. So it's basically a framework that gives you ideas that how you are going to address a problem. Now, if you see here, serial number 5, this one, the goal or the impact. So whether it is relevant and effective for the serial number 1, so you at the end you have to see that both these one, this one, the result or the goal or impact, and the problem, these should be linked. For example, if the problem is lack of health facilities, so the goal should be improved infrastructure of health facilities. So you have to verify these two statements then, whether my goal is addressing the problem or not. Now, the next important points for this ToC stage is proper consultation at ToC stage with all relevant stakeholders. You are not to sit in a room and just go to Google and search all these things. You have to do consultation, because the relevant stakeholder consultation is very important at this stage. For example, if it is an educational project, so the education department, school, teachers, if health, then health department, health facilities, etc. If it is related to wash, so the relevant department, the relevant facilities in the villages and cities, you have to do proper consultation at this stage with all relevant stakeholders. This is very important. Example of TOC, let me show you some example. Here is a simple example. We will be developing these with real examples also, but first let me introduce these different types of logic model. For example, if you see, this is also a type of theory of change. Here at the first stage, you have to define the problem. What is the problem? What are the challenges or the barrier? What are the solutions or activities? And what will be the outcome or the result or the impact? Different examples are used in different organizations, but the basic structure is, as I explained to you in the previous slide, this one. If you see, what is the problem, what are the barrier, what is suggested to do, and what will be the output or outcome, and then ultimately the result, core or impact. Basically, these are the basic information that you needed, whatever format or whatever infographic you use for that. But the basic thing is that there should be a problem statement, that this is the problem, these are the challenges and the barriers, these are the solutions, and this is the outcome if we do these activities in a proper way. So this is the basic structure. There are different examples, we will be discussing them in detail. Now, second example, you can develop a theory of change like this also. For example, here the problem, then what are the changes, what are the output, what are the outcome, what is the impact, and here some organization use some approaches. Here they describe all those approaches, and here the assumptions and the risks. So this type of template is also used for theory of change. So you can develop this type of template also. For example, this was theory of change for a project. So here you can see there is this problem. They have described the problem here, then the barriers, and then the activities, and then here you can see the outputs, and then here the outcome, and then here the impact and the overall vision or goal. Different approaches are used by different organizations, and here they have described some of the assumptions and enablers, and on this side they have describe their strategies, or you can say approaches, etc. So these are the different type of example which we will be discussing in detail while going on. So these are the different examples that we will be seeing and describing, and then developing our own theory of change for a scenario. Now, why TOC is important? Why you need theory of change? Most of the time this is overlooked also. In some projects we have seen that there is no theory of change, or there are just statements available. That is also enough if you have some type of information, but the most important thing is there should be a problem, and then the relevant drivers of change are the relevant barriers, and then the drivers of change, and then outputs, and then outcome. It gives us input for developing other logic models. When you are developing other logic models, so this TOC is the basic document that will guide you onward in developing the other logic model also, and it shows us the way how to proceed to address the problem. It helps in identifying relevant barriers, which onward help in identifying what sort of interventions along with innovations we should do to cope up with the problem and the barriers. So this is very important and it will guide your proposal, your activities designing, all the inputs, all the activities, all the output that you need for a project. So it will give you ideas about that. If you have done the proper consultation with the relevant stakeholder, because they have the ground realities information and examples which are based on real scenarios. Once the ToC is prepared, then based on the ToC, we develop a results framework. Now, what is results framework? For result framework, the key important element here is the ToC, that theory of change, and here also you need some consultations. Now, the result framework is a strategic planning tool that helps mission, organization, and project stakeholders identify the development hypothesis and think through what result lead to other results. This is the logical sequence of all your input, activities, output, outcome, and then the impact overall. It basically shows us goal, strategic objective, outcomes, etc. The intermediate results. Some organization use intermediate results also. Some organization use outcomes, then the outputs, and here the activities and the input. So this is basically in this sequence you will go activities, output, and then the intermediate results and this. But you will have to start from the goal, because if you have a goal, so you can decide about the strategic objective, the outcome, and then the results, and then the output, and then the inputs. Now, for example, here you see if our goal is to improve health service delivery. For example, there is a problem that health service delivery is not in a proper way, or there is lack of health service delivery. There is no quality, not properly accessible. So you have decided about a goal that improved health service delivery is my goal. So outcome outcome you will have to show that access to quality services improved in project regions. Then you will have to decide about the outputs, the different outputs that will contribute to outcome. So here you can see access and quality, both you have to improve. So here you can see you will have to design some output related to capacity, because if your goal is to improve health service delivery, so you have to focus all those. This is basically already described in the ToC. If you have developed a ToC for this, so there you would have seen already the barrier or the challenges. So if there is lack of access or quality, so obviously there is a need of capacity, then there is a need of effective health system mechanisms, then there is a need of strengthening, then there is the need of client-centric services, and then the demand and the outreach also. If your goal is this is just an example. So this is basically a result framework which shows you that what are your outputs, how they will contribute to the outcome, and how that outcome will contribute to the goal overall. And this is also based on the ToC, from where you have extracted the information of the barriers or the drivers of changes, and for those drivers and for those barriers to develop the output and then the outcome and then the goal. So this is basically a result framework example. Different organizations use different templates. We will be discussing all those templates. You can see this type of result framework is also developed here. They have designed their output, then the intermediate results, then different intermediate results contribute to different strategic objective, and then different strategic objective contribute to the. So basically the result framework tell us what is the goal, what are the outcomes. If we complete these outputs, so we will achieve the intermediate results outcome, and which will lead to the achievement of the goal, impact, or our strategic objective, and ultimately the long-term goal. This is basically the result framework which tells us that the problem that you have identified in the ToC, for that problem, these are the outputs, these are the intermediate results, and these are the strategic objectives which will contribute to the overall goal, which is based on the problem statement which we have already discussed in the theory of change. Now, once the result framework is developed, so you have two key documents already developed, the ToC and the result framework. Now, the logical framework is a little bit of a lengthy document. Some organizations use it as M&E framework also. But this logical framework is now the interpretation of the result framework. The key elements for this logical framework is the ToC and then the result framework. And here also you have to do consultations. Now, the log frame underlying a project organization or projects to define exactly what indicators, set up actions, and resources are needed to achieve and measure the results, outcome, and impact. Now you have already developed a result framework where you have the outputs. Now here in this stage, in the logical framework, you have to interpret those outputs into indicators, the outcome also into the indicators and the goal also into the indicator language. And here also you have to decide about the actions which are and the resources which are needed to achieve those outputs and outcome and impact. So this is basically a logical framework is basically a detailed interpretation of the result framework. And the result framework was an interpretation of the theory of change. Now this is the LFA, for example. Here also what you need levels, for example, goal, outcome, output, input, activities, etc. What are the indicators? And then the definitions and the calculation of those. And this is very important. For example, if you have an indicator where you see that percent of health facilities providing quality health services. Now, if this is your indicator or a target, so you have to define your percent also. What is the target of that percentage? And if your indicator was that percent of health facilities providing quality health services, so you have to define the quality, the health services, and the calculations also that how you will extract this information. This is basically very important. Then what will be the evidence or the means of verification are the MOVs, and what are the key assumptions or the risks or different type of such type of challenges which you need to consider while keeping in view the definitions and the means of verification. Now here you see first you have to define indicators and targets and definition and means of verification for the impact goal, then for the outcome or the purpose, then the outputs and then activities. Some organization use this as M&E framework also. This is a type of, but in the M&E framework there are some more columns needed. For example, baseline, targets, what are the targets, what are the baseline values, and other information that we will discuss in the M&E framework. But that M&E framework will basically be the extended document from this logical. So this is basically logical framework now. So we discussed so far the important foundational framework, ToC, result framework, and logical framework. Now here you see these are closely linked. ToC leads to result framework, which leads to the logical framework. And then this logical framework basically leads to the proposals and the M&E framework and the M&E plan and the work plan. So this was the ToC, this was the result framework, this is the example of the logical framework. Now here in this slide you will see all these three in one place. So this is basically ToC, this is the result framework, this is the logical framework. And this is the key difference that you can see from the templates also. This one shows a different sort of information. This is based on the ToC and this one is based on then the result framework and the ToC also. These are these key three documents that you need to understand and then how to develop them. So now in the step 2, developing proposal, work plan and budget, and key important elements are reference points for this step 2 is the logic model and the consultation. So here we will be developing proposal, work plan and budget. And then in the step 3, you have to develop the M&E framework and the M&E plan. This is developed after the proposal because in the proposal you decide about the activities, the targets, etc. And once all these documents are prepared, after that you can develop the M&E framework and the M&E plan. And then comes the step 4, which is the implementation, how to put these into practice. So these key documents, the proposal, work plan, M&E framework and M&E plan, you will have to put these into practice now. So we will be discussing this stage also. Now the next step is how to develop, which is developing logic model like ToC, logical framework, log frame, then the result framework, then developing project document like proposal for a project, work plan and budget, and then developing M&E framework, M&E plan, and then step 4, implementation, how to put these into practice. And for the practice, you need these two documents, then work plan and the M&E. I don't want to have a lengthy videos. I hope you enjoyed the session. Thank you for watching. Now in session 3, which has also been uploaded, we will discuss as how to develop these logic model like theory of change, result framework, logical framework, then the proposal work plan and M&E framework and M&E plan. So that video has already been uploaded and the link is given in the description.
If you like the video, so kindly click the like button, share it, and subscribe the channel.